Let's go ahead and get rolling. Madeline, you were just saying that continuity helps with working on two projects at once, that going between them both in a single day doesn't work. Is that something we should look at as a topic or just an offhand remark?
Just an offhand. I have some other questions.
Good. Yeah. All right, bring them on. Why don't we start with one of your questions?
Okay. My question is, in the novel that I'm just developing, I would love it, the way I'm picturing it, I would love it if my protagonist could die at the end, but she would be able to go through some of her arc prior to dying, and in her death scene, she would have certain insights that would help her to die in peace. But her arc would not have the kind of completion of someone who would actually then be able to do something with those insights and live their life differently. And I wonder how problematic do you think that might be?
Oh, this is a great question. This is juicy. I think it's not a problem, ultimately. It really depends on how you handle the death and dying and that, shall we say, truncated or cut off character arc. So my question to you would be, will you write this in such a way that the reader will understand those lessons and the reader can then complete that character arc? You know, so as a reader, we might walk away from a book and keep pondering the questions that book poses to us. Now, not every reader can. We can't control what's in other people's heads, of course. But ideally, your ideal reader is going to pick up that arc where your character's death leaves off and be able to complete the message in those lessons. And I don't want it to sound like a preachy thing or like a get on a soapbox thing, but just the way you would have it finish if your character lived. We want the reader to have that same sense of meaning and purpose, right? It just has to progress.
No, I think it would, because I think if I do this the way I hope to, the reader's feeling will be, you know, what a shame that she couldn't have realized that sooner. And as a sort of life lesson, you know, the thought, don't make the same mistake, you know, in my own life as the reader. So I think in that sense, hopefully they would complete.
Yeah, that's great. And then the other thing I would say about this is that you want to make sure your ending satisfies the reader, which does not mean make the reader happy. Your reader might be sad the character's dead or even angry at you for killing off the character. But they will close the book and feel like that was a good book. That was a story worth my time and attention, right? So by being satisfied, we think, okay, that book was enriching in some way or as entertaining as I wanted it to be, or whatever value we want to place on a particular story. So you want to do this in such a way that even if readers hate the fact that this character died, they're going to say, yes, that's how it had to end, or that was the most meaningful ending. So that's something to keep in mind and watch out for as you build up to that death.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Is this a single point of view book?
Trying to unmute. Okay. No, and that's kind of related to my other question, because it has multiple points of view.
Okay. So, but the one you kill off would be the protagonist or the main protagonist?
Yes, right.
Okay, great. And then you have to decide what you're doing with the remaining point of view characters after that character's death and how they're going to factor in, if this death is the climax, then all that remains is the denouement. So it's not one of those multiple POV stories where you kill one character and another one just becomes the main protagonist. Or is it?
Not really, because if I understand, because I think if that were to happen, there would have to be a lot more action subsequent.
Right.
But there is another of the point of view characters does have a main arc, and that isn't resolved until after the death of the protagonist. So,
okay.
But it doesn't take super long.
Right. Right. And so this death does close one of the main storylines. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That is similar to A Stone's Throw. I have 3 point of view characters, but 2 of them are the protagonists, and one of them is killed at the end in her climax. So obviously I don't have a problem with killing your protagonist at the end. Yes. Cool. Anything else you want to say about this topic? Or Alan, do you want to weigh in on it and add or ask more questions about killing protagonists? And
I've rarely read a book where the protagonist dies that I liked the ending. But that's me. I like the good guys to win in the end and the bad guys to die.
Right.
But and so that kind is that's tricky for me. But I'm probably not your key market, so it's okay.
Right.
Well, can I say one thing? She does win in the sense that her death protects and saves someone else. So in that sense,
I could see that being of value, a sacrifice for someone else. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, to some extent it is.
Sure.
Yeah.
Then I think that works.
That helps. Okay.
Well,
not that you need my approval.
Well, this raises an interesting point about your readers. In a story like that, you don't want to tell people beforehand that this character is going to die at the end. That would be a massive spoiler and turn off a lot of potential readers. Some readers will be upset this character is dead, but that's your prerogative as the author to decide what's right for this story. And if it's what's right, then I say stick to it. I think the stories make demands on us as writers. With A Stone's Throw, the character I killed was not evolving. She was not adapting to her new circumstances and growing through her arc. And that's why I killed her, right? But the other protagonist sounds cold when I say that.
Yeah, you're a tough cookie, Alita.
But the other protagonist, Gemma, she did grow and evolve, and she did complete her arc. And then the third POV, Peter and the baby were fine. And what I have found with readers is they say at the beginning of the book, Simona, the one who dies, is their favorite character. And at the end of the book, Gemma is their favorite character. And I didn't write it thinking, readers are going to switch their allegiance, but I did write it knowing that their arcs were not going to be parallel this way. They were going to kind of cross that way, and that they were on different trajectories as human beings. So artistically, that was my goal. And interestingly enough, I think readers as a result do have that emotional switch that happens when those trajectories cross. So your objective as the writer is to be true to your story and true to your characters, right? And just know some readers, like Alan, will hate the fact that you killed off a character at the end, but Right? What can you do about that? Yeah. So, other thoughts or new questions?
I have a question. I am finishing my manuscript and I am shipping it off to my beta readers, hopefully the 1st of October.
Okay.
And I gave my last story, I had 2 beta readers, and I didn't really tell them anything, and I didn't really get a lot of value from it.
Mm-hmm.
What do you express to your beta readers as you give them, and what questions, how do you use this as a resource that's effective?
Right. So, what do you expect to do with this manuscript when you hear back from beta readers? What level draft is this? How close to publication is it?
I want to take if they find things that are confusing, or if they find things that they just really hate, I would be willing to revise those and edit those. I'm about a lot of the manuscript, though, I think is pretty well clean.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say it's about 1 step away.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Okay, good. Good. That's where you want it to be. You want it to be 1 step away from publication. So I'm glad you said that, Alan, because a lot of writers confuse beta readers with early critique partners. And so they give manuscripts that are too raw to beta readers. Beta readers are like marketing research when you've already got the product and the packaging and you just want to see how it's going to land with an audience. So I would give them a form like a Google survey or maybe SurveyMonkey or whatever you like to use. Make it super, super easy. So all they have to do is click some places to respond to you and ask them a few very specific questions and a few open-ended questions. So if there's something you think might be off, ask them about that specifically. Maybe you want to know how is the pace of this book? Slow, perfect, too fast?
Okay.
Something like that is very specific and doesn't let them be wishy-washy in their choice. Something open-ended is, was there anywhere you were confused about the storyline? And then give them a few lines so they can answer, but ask them what chapter or chapters so that you can pinpoint it. So if they give you some big thing, I was confused about the journey crossing the ocean and that spans 10 chapters, you're like, well, wait a minute, what part? So you want to give them room to express themselves with those essay questions, but you also want to make them pinpoint things in a way that is helpful to you.
Okay.
Right. And I would ask them, who's your favorite character? So if you've got multiple POVs, you might be surprised that it's not the character you think it will be. Or, who's your favorite supporting character if you've only got one POV character? Because those favorite supporting characters, that can help you decide what to do with them in the next book, since this is a series. Oh, I need to up that person's role a little bit. Or, okay, I know this subplot is really going to get at my readers because they love that character. I don't know, what else? Do you have any ideas, Madeline? I know, you have to unmute. Or Alan, any thoughts while Madeline is unmuting?
I don't know. I did send my last manuscript it was too raw.
Yeah.
It And it was my first one, and it's fine. I only sent it to 2. This time I've got 4.
Okay.
And I'm pretty happy with that. But I want to know what's the right questions to ask.
Right.
So that I get useful feedback from it.
Yeah. So you, right now, with only 4 beta readers, hopefully they're people you know who will actually read the book and respond to you. When you get,
they will.
Good. When you get to the point, but people who will be honest and won't just tell you it's good and they like it, right? They need to actually give you useful feedback. And that's where those questions come into play. We're kind of picking people's brains can help. Now, if you know them well enough, you can have coffee with them or get them on the phone. That's even better, because then you can react to their feedback and ask them, what do you mean by that? Okay, can you tell me where that was? Or, you don't want to put beta readers in the position of giving you craft advice. So don't think of them as peers. They're readers. So you want their reactions as readers, their gut reactions, what they like, what they don't like, where they were confused, where they were wanting more because they were really deeply engaged, right? It's that kind of marketing feedback. So, you might flummox a non-writer by asking for something too writerly, but you can certainly get them to articulate more of what they mean if you have that relationship. If not, the form is a good thing. Keep it short. No more than 10 questions. The things that you can make multiple choice, check a box, do, but give them, the open-ended stuff. And I like to end with something very general, like, what would you want me to know about your reading experience? That might not be the best wording, but something that just gives them license to say anything that they want, anything that's on their mind.
That's very helpful.
Good.
I was thinking that, I'm not sure where this would fit, but I've become more aware that I do want my readers to have certain emotional reactions. Your question, how do you want the reader to feel about this character? And so I'm now thinking maybe that would be a question I might want to ask, how, did your feelings change about any of these characters over the course of the book? And if so, that was my intention, to make, hopefully people's feelings would change about some of the characters, with the forgiveness book. So
right.
I don't know if that feels relevant to you, Alan, but I'm thinking, what do you think, Alita, that might be helpful?
Yeah, so that is one of those things I would put in the specific question category, where you as the artist know your goals for the story and how it reaches and affects readers. So for your story, Madeline, I would ask, did your feelings about character X change over the course of the book? If so, can you identify when that shift occurred, or can you tell me a little bit about that change and give them that, 2 to 3 sentence block for the mini essay? That's one where if you make it too open-ended, like, did your feelings change about any of the characters, they might just quickly say no, because it's not pinpointing what you want them to think about. They might just be like, no, it was all good. Everybody did what they should have done and it was fine and I liked it, right? So that's a great question that might not be appropriate to every story. And it's one where, as one of my goals as an artist, I would pinpoint it, right? I would make them think about that with how I worded my question. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great note. What else?
Well, I have a question about in this novel that I'm just developing,
Mm-hmm.
let me see how I can. There's a character. There's a mother of a preschool, a little 3-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
That mother, whose husband has so recently died, she's in so much grief that she's not paying as much attention to the child. And in fact, she comes close to being neglecting in a serious way.
Right.
The child's grandmother discovers this and begins to suspect, the mother's name is Deborah, begins to suspect that Deborah is even perhaps drinking or abusing drugs. That's what finds her almost comatose on the bed one day with no one really looking after the little girl.
Mm-hmm.
What I realized recently, since I do have multiple points of view in here, I went back to your point of view book, and I realized I think what I am picturing is what you're calling an unreliable narrator, in the sense of two characters disagreeing on what the truth is. The grandmother's story, for instance, as she talks to a friend, is to say, and then I found all these cookies in the oven burned to a crisp. So she's going to tell the story of what she observes in such a way that it could be really serious. You could be wanting to take some steps.
Right.
On the other hand, the mother herself, Deborah, is going to be staunchly denying that there's any alcohol or drug abuse, and insisting that she's fine now, that there's no need to worry.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, is that what you would call an unreliable narrator, in the sense of two people, or maybe not?
No, not really, because that is a case of he said, she said, or in this case, she said, right, where they both have different takes on the events of the story. So if your narrator is authorial, is this a third person or a first person narrative?
It's third person.
Okay, so let's say you've got a third person authorial narrator, an invisible narrator who is objective. So this narrator is going to show the reader the cookies burnt to a crisp in the oven.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the narrator might not show us why those cookies were burnt to a crisp, right?
Right.
Did Deborah work all night on job applications and fall asleep at the kitchen table while the cookies were in the oven? Or did Deborah drink herself into a stupor while the cookies were in the oven?
Exactly.
So if your narrator shows us the cause, the reader knows whether to believe Deborah or her mom. But if the narrator only shows us the effect, those burnt cookies, then Deborah can tell us her story, her mom can tell us her story, and the reader has to choose sides.
Right.
Right.
And that's how it would have to be to make the plot work.
Right.
For quite a long time, the reader would have to choose sides. I guess the reason I thought it was more like that unreliable narrator is because I thought that I need to, or what I want, I think, to have happen is that the clues that that probably the grandmother is wrong and exaggerating the amount of danger, which then leads to all kinds of bad things happening.
Right.
Would start to sort of accumulate over the course, but the reader would still not be sure.
Right. Right. So
yeah.
If it's an unreliable narrator, then your narrator is lying to the reader. Your narrator is deceiving the reader, and often we see this in first-person narratives. It could be a third-person essayist narrator, the personality narrator, not the authorial. We expect our authorial narrator to be neutral.
Okay.
Impartial.
Yeah.
Right. So if you wanted to invent a narrator who's going to mislead the reader, then why is that happening? Yeah. What is this narrator's goal in this situation?
Yeah. No, that's not what I want to do. So that helps, because here I'm studying all this stuff about how challenging an unreliable narrator is, and I'm thinking, oh man, I should maybe try a different book. but it's so right. It's not quite as complicated then if it's simply
yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, you're just going to have to be very careful what you actually show the reader. So you might find yourself writing the entire, movement so that you know what it is and you have all of your facts straight, and then you're going to have to cut that scene so that the reader doesn't see it, and you might have to do a little tweaking here and there so that you don't give it away to the reader until it's time for the reveal, right?
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Yeah, great topic. All right, what's next? Oh, you're muted again.
Okay. I don't want to take all the time. Ellen, do you have something else you want to ask?
No, that was my only thing was about beta readers, because that's what I've got coming up.
Okay.
So I was just fine to listen and learn.
Okay.
Excellent.
Well, if I can keep going then.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. See, I feel like the more I keep working on this and then I reread some stuff in your books, I think, oh, I'm probably not supposed to do that. Like you don't really like the antagonist to have a point of view and to be a point of view character. So, I mean, I do understand what you're saying, and it really hit me. You don't want it to, it's so easy for that to be a spoiler then.
Right.
So I will have to be really careful about that.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like for the plot to work, since it involves a kidnapping, it feels like I have to have that, I want that I'd have to have scenes where none of the other characters are going to be present with that antagonist character.
Right.
So then I thought, well, he also kind of fits with the theme, so why not give him a little bit of an arc? Only, of course, he's not going to come to some wonderful insights and fruition, but why not at least show that what's going to bring him down, in fact, is the same. I mean, the theme is kind of pride goeth before the fall, or this idea of hubris, and he certainly has that, as well as the protagonist and the supporting character, the main supporting character. So what do you think about that, I guess?
Well, it all depends on the execution. If you can do it effectively, then great, more power to you. A lot of people who give their antagonist a point of view end up sabotaging their own work. So I would really carefully examine this character's point of view and ask, am I only showing the reader things that must be known to advance the story and that cannot be known any other way? Right? Like if you're your protagonist, if you're Deborah and your child is kidnapped, you are not privy to the villain's machinations before the kidnapping. You only know what happens the moment it happens.
Right.
And you don't know what's happening to your child until you hear things, evidence, your child tells you something. You start piecing together that story. So what about this book makes the kidnapper's point of view essential? Or what about this point of view is essential to this story?
Well, the complicating factor with it is that the person I'm calling the kidnapper does not himself actually take the child. He is manipulating another character who's a a child care worker, and who her hubris is that she thinks, despite not having any children of her own, she would make the best mother in the world, and that she knows far better than the parents of the children in her preschool, where she's an aide to the teacher, that she knows far better than the parents how children ought to be treated. So when she learns from this grandmother that this child may be in danger, she gets way over involved with all that, and she too becomes convinced that this child might be in danger. So this is one of those, kidnapping tales where the child's being taken by a person who's not going to harm her.
Okay.
So the reader will know, because they'll know Hannah and her point of view, they will know what's actually happening, although the mother won't, the mother of the child won't. The reason I feel like I have to get the guy in there is because at one point, the way I've thought out the plot, without going into a whole lot of detail, at one point Hannah will decide to return that child earlier than planned to the grandmother. Her whole thought was this could be a child who's raised by the grandma who's clearly going to be not neglectful, etc. And then the guy who's involved is going to go find Hannah, the child care worker, because he doesn't know she's returned the child, and he's become concerned that she's going to be the connection that makes the police find him.
Okay.
So he has to. Well, I guess you're saying, why couldn't he just show up there instead of having a whole? Oh, why couldn't he just show up there?
Right. He can do what he does without your other point of view characters knowing what he's doing when he's not in front of them. Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We don't need to see every movement every character makes behind the scenes. Well, and often when writers try to give us all of those movements, all of the machinery turning, it bogs down the story, right? The pace slows way down, and we get concerned with the minutiae of how and why this thing is going to happen instead of just experiencing it happening.
Yeah, I understand that, but I mean, in the scenes that I'm picturing, Hannah is going back to this little cottage, planning to meet this guy who she thinks is in love with her. She's is a wrong idea. She's trusting him. Oh, okay, even so. And I was going to say, and the tension should come from the fact that the reader understands she's walking right back into a trap. But maybe I can still build in enough. I'm trying to build in uncertainty in Hannah's mind along the way. How trustworthy is this guy? And so I guess if I've done a good enough job of that, then the reader could have that fear without seeing the fellow.
Yes.
And I might have to get rid of his friend because he's got a sidekick who's that would be the other reason to keep his point of view, so we could have the sidekick.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like he should go. The other issue is you're building into Hannah's point of view concern about this guy. He loves me. I trust him. Wait a minute, something's fishy about him. Should I trust him? Is he safe? I've come this far. I'm stuck with him, but I need to pull out. I don't know, right? And you want the reader to follow that journey.
Right.
You want the reader to engage with both her trust and her suspicion as you move us through there. But if we're in his point of view, we know he's no good. We know what he's up to.
Right.
So then we're just looking at Hannah going, come on, wake up. What's your problem, woman? Right? We aren't experiencing her journey with her because we know too much.
Okay.
There are times when we want to let the reader know more than the point of view character, but they're fewer than you might think, right? Because it sabotages our investment with that protagonist when we see too many things she can't see. Right? And now you mentioned that Hannah has the child, and we know Hannah won't hurt the child. But I assume Deborah doesn't know Hannah has the child and won't hurt her. So you have to be careful there again, because Deborah's going to be freaking out because her baby's missing. But the reader knows the baby's fine. So where does your tension go? Where do your stakes go?
I'll have to think about that one, because I think some of that has to do with how I can't stand it when I think a child might be in real danger. So I don't want to like do that. But I see what you're saying, at least maybe for a certain, well, I'll have to think it through. If I can convey enough of Hannah's uncertainty about this fella, then the things that happen, I mean, like Hannah's always watching Amber Alerts because she's got this obsession with keeping people, and there will be an Amber Alert about this child, but it won't make sense to Hannah because they'll be describing a different car, for instance, which will be the guy's car. But so maybe maybe I can delay the point at which, I'll have to think all that through.
Yep.
I guess. Yeah. All right. Okay. I'll think about that. Okay. Thanks.
Good. Yeah. Do you have any other questions? It's just us on the call now. Alan left, so.
Okay. Well, let's see. So I have to, gosh, that point about the tension, that's a big deal. I just read one of Dennis Lehane. Is that how you say his last name?
Yeah.
And that first in that series, the one that that's sort of a kidnapping where it's a police officer who has been trying to protect kids by taking them away from homes in which there's serious danger. But you don't know until the reader doesn't know until very close to the end that really this child is safe.
Yeah. Yeah, so think about the effect that had on you as a reader.
Yes, definitely.
And what you want to do then as a writer.
Yeah. And I think the other thing I have to give up when I was reading some of those parts of your book on point of view, and you mentioned sometimes choosing to show an antagonist point of view. I think the phrase you used was something like for artistic purposes, to give a glimpse into that mind. And that was also part of why I wanted to help, keep the antagonist.
Right.
Keep having this thing of where I want to make sociopathic characters more than their sociopathy. I want to try to have this fuller character kind of acquaint readers with, this could be the guy next door. This could be the guy they were so excited to call them for a date, right. And like Hannah, who's getting more and more suspicious, but still. But maybe that's not, given what I would lose in tension building, maybe it's just not a trade-off that's, it's not worth the trade-off.
Right. And I think you can show that he's more than just sociopathic through her point of view and through her relationship with him. When we experience other people, it's not by going inside their heads, it's through their words and actions and the feelings we get around them, how much we enjoy their company. And when they set us off and feel kind of creepy or we start questioning them, again, it's not because we were in our heads. So there's really You haven't told me anything yet that convinces me you need this point of view.
Well, it's kind of like what you told me about in the forgiveness novel about the father, way back when you said, I don't think you need his point of view. I think you can reveal everything you really want to reveal, and more powerfully in the way he treats his wife and stuff like that. So,
right. And we've been thinking about the empathy connection, that blog post. If I have too many point of view characters in a story, you're asking me as a reader to engage with each of them empathetically. And so instead of going on a 300-page journey with one character I'm deeply invested in, now am I going on a 150-page journey with each of them, or a 100-page journey with 3 of them? Or like what are you doing to not only my attention, but also my connection with the character who is my vehicle through the story?
Yeah.
I invest in and feel with and want for and am scared for or cheering for, right? Now I'm shifting players. And so is it worth that?
Yeah.
Is that point of view worth asking your reader to make that shift? And you might give us snippets of the antagonist's point of view for those artistic reasons. So it's not a big investment. It's enough to pique curiosity and raise tension, but it's not enough to take us away from your protagonist, right?
Yeah. So that raises another question for me that we have a little time. Okay, I can see I'm hesitant to bring this up because I'm afraid you're going to say, oh my God. But,
oh no.
Okay, yeah, another thing. So Hannah, who is the protagonist, I can't tell you what trouble I had deciding which of the 4 characters that I initially thought I needed to have having point of views. Well, one was the antagonist, so get rid of him. Not the protagonist, but I really thought that one of the other 2 characters, other than, I thought the mother or the grandmother should be the point of view, the protagonist. And then when we did those agency trees,
right,
the only one that did anything in this story, really, it was Hannah over and over and over again. It was the child care worker with this obsession.
That's great. I think that's so exciting.
Yeah, it was, Now, the thing is, as far as this whole problem of a protagonist, that you want them to be likable enough.
Or fascinating enough.
So
Right.
that's where I put her, because she, right from the beginning, she comes across as a little strange. She just takes it too far.
Yeah.
I have her in a very, almost an opening, not quite, but almost an opening scene where she's walking through the park. This is how she meets the grandmother. She's walking through the park and she sees a man on a bench who has binoculars, but he doesn't seem to be looking at the birds doesn't seem to be pointing them upwards at the tree, but way across to the children in the play lot. And she not only confronts him, I thought, first I just had him, basically trying to talk to him, and then she has this little test to see whether she mentions something about a particular bird, and he clearly doesn't. He's clearly lying about what he can see, what he knows. Then she tells him, she gets angry. But then I thought to myself, how with the book on forgiveness, she keeps saying, ramp it up, make some,
right.
Oh my God, at the end of it, she's got her mace out, and he is,
nice.
So she's extreme from the very beginning. So, and like a little weird, and it can start to seem kind of creepy herself.
Yeah.
So, and yet so then I guess I'm asking most readers, they're not going to identify probably with that extreme of Hannah's obsession, but I guess I thought they could identify with, because of her backstory, maybe they could identify with not so much how damaged she is, but how understandable it is that she is driven to be protective. And maybe that's enough.
Yeah, we can get on her side and say yes to her choices in the story without agreeing with them ethically or personally, right? So using her point of view, we are seeing the world through her.
Yes.
It's just like you said in that comment on the blog post that we tell ourselves stories, right? So experience, belief, and then those stories we tell ourselves. So as readers, in her point of view, we're privy to the stories she is telling.
Yeah.
So we see her fear for the child. We see her hanging on the grandmother's every word. Now, I'm wondering if you need the grandmother and mother's points of view. Hannah sounds like a fantastic character, and we need to, if we see that Deborah's getting it together and she's trying to be a good mom and everything's really okay with her, how can we get on Hannah's side as much as we disagree with her? How can we go through her lens and say, yeah, yep, okay, I'm with you. I might not agree with you, but I see why you're doing this. I see why it's inevitable for you to do this thing, right?
Yeah.
So look at that and ask yourself if those 2 points of view are going to sabotage Hannah's point of view.
Yeah. So that's why I kept on realizing, well, I have to keep the reader uncertain about whose story is accurate. But you're saying, why just don't include Deborah's story? I mean, don't include information that would verify that, in fact.
Right. Well, maybe we see Deborah and the grandmother through Hannah's point of view. So they come to pick up the child. Maybe Hannah sees Deborah sneaking a cigarette outside before she comes in to pick up her daughter, and she's so disapproving of that. But you know what she doesn't know is that Deborah hasn't had a cigarette in 10 years, and it's just this death and the grief, and she just it's a crutch. It's just a thing she needs right now. But Hannah's not going to allow for that. Because you don't smoke near kids, right? That's Hannah's thing.
Right.
So you can show us Deborah and the grandmother. Maybe Hannah fuels the grandmother's worry. Oh, I caught her having a cigarette. Did you know she's smoking? And grandma's like, oh no, she quit 10 years ago. I can't believe and so they
do feed into each other the way I have it envisioned. They definitely. Yeah, right.
And poor Deborah sounds like she's just a pawn because these, it's Hannah's point of view, but Deborah's mother is driving so much of this narrative about Deborah's life. Deborah's losing control through the death and the grief and her mother's interventions, and then Hannah, kidnapping her child. So, but if we're really sympathizing with Deborah, the grieving widow, young mother, how can we say yes to anything Hannah does?
Right.
Right? And yes is not, I agree with her choices. It's just, yep, I'm in the story. Yep, she's doing this. Yep, I'm going on that ride with her.
Yeah. Okay, this is really thought-provoking. I have to I really did think, I really want to think this book through much more, ahead of time. And because when I first started and I did the storyboarding for the forgiveness novel, and I was going to say I was, but I still am very excited about the whole storyboarding approach. I just love it. But at that time I thought, well, that's all I have to do is just, storyboard. And then what I've come to realize is just how much I need to develop the characters before I, can even storyboard. and see that interaction between the plot points and, all that stuff that you talked about in the course on characters. So that was so interesting. And I just want to say, maybe I said this in my feedback, I don't know, but I didn't major in English literature. When I had to make this, in my mind, I had to make this very deliberate choice because I had taken an initial psychology course and fallen in love with it.
Uh-huh.
Really in love with it. And I thought, oh yeah, but I wanted to major in English. And then I remember thinking to myself, but you'll always read. Doesn't matter what else you'll do in your life, you'll always read. So kind of like, you don't need that. So I haven't been exposed to the kinds of discussions that I could watch on the previous class. And it was just, it was really great, really.
Oh, good.
Yeah, there were times I wished it were a live call because sometimes I loved some of the stories or things that, we were reading and maybe the three other students were rather indifferent or
right.
not as excited about it. And I thought, it was great, Alita.
Oh, good.
It was just great. And
good.
That one about where there was also the essay, it's about culture and culture robbing us of our American culture.
Was that Juno Diaz?
Yes.
Yeah.
What a great story. And then
yes.
So then when I was trying to apply that to Hannah, and I thought, well, but she's Polish. I'm Polish American, and I thought about the stereotypes of Polish cleaning ladies and Polish nannies. Those are the biggest associations in today's world. And then I remembered when I was like in my 20s, what were called Polish jokes.
Yes, the Polak jokes.
And they were all about how stupid they were, right?
Yep.
So here I have Hannah, who's got this hubris to believe she's smarter and more competent than anyone else. And it was just so neat to fit in that broader cultural background to the influences that would make that an especially sensitive topic, or she's especially sensitive to any criticism. So anyway, I really loved that course. That was great.
Oh, thank you. That's so great to hear.
Yeah. All right. And what you're saying today, okay. Well, I'm glad I don't exactly have to go back to the drawing board because it's such a step.
Right.
Not really draw.
Good.
But now I have a lot of thoughts to really take it slow and think about it and keep in mind that idea of tension and reveal. And what am I up? What's that trade-off and what's possible? I think I'll just what's possible. If it's just Hannah, what would be possible? If it's just Hannah.
Right. Yes, and since she is not a super likable character making agreeable choices, think about what happens to that reader empathetic connection when you give us the other points of view. You sort of dilute Hannah's point of view, and that could be damaging for this story.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for everything.
You're welcome. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.